Hi, and welcome to the second devlog of my game, Journey of Happiness. So in this episode I am going to start with a sneak peek of the current state of the game, and then I'm gonna go through all of the stages that I went through to achieve this current state. So I have a quick slot bar, I have an inventory system, and I have additional items that I can actually use and that are already animated. So I can, for example, dig up tiles, I can water tiles, and I can also plant crops. But let's dive into how I got to this pot. The first thing that I wanted to do was rework the farming area. So I got rid of all of the tiles that I placed previously, all of the simple sprites, and I created my own farmable tile, which is in this case actually a prefab, so it is a game object that I'm placing. I was thinking about using a scriptable tile, but I decided against it and to use a prefab, in this case a game object that stores different kind of information and also enables the player to change the sprite. And here you see the player walking through the new farming area, and you already noticed that there is something not quite right with all of these new sprites. And yeah, the reason for this is that they're actually game objects and therefore they have a pivot point, so sometimes they get rendered above the player. So that was a bug that I needed to fix. I changed a couple of things in the game object, or more in the prefab, and voila, the bug was fixed. The player was able to walk over these tiles. I started to extend the farming area even further to give the player as much room to plant crops as possible. I also started to extend the script of these game objects, so the player is able with a left mouse button click to actually get the tile in front of him, and to then be able to change it, to dig it up basically, to turn it into a dirt tile. And so here you can see the outcome of the first implementation, which was surprisingly easy to implement, I have to be honest. But you can see it's not perfect, so you just have these brown squares that are being placed, and sometimes it was not working perfectly. So next up, I actually created a couple of different types of dirt tiles. So here you see dirt tiles surrounded by grass and not surrounded by grass. And also I already created some tiles that are visible when the player waters these tiles. So I created a small tile set which I was planning to use by creating my own basic rule tiles. So depending on what tile is, for example, on the right, left, top or bottom side, I will choose the corresponding tile. I actually didn't think that I would encounter so many bugs creating my own rule tiles, but well, here is a small collage of what happened during the development.
I ask you about love. They quote me a sonnet. You've never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable. Oh my God, what an angel on earth just for you. Could rescue you from the depths of hell, and you wouldn't know what it's like to be her angel.
But at the end of the day I was able to fix all of the bugs, and here you see the outcome, and all of these tiles are aligned perfectly and are being placed perfectly now, which made me super happy. And as always when it comes to a project like this, the next problem actually occurred in that instance. As you can see, I have these white lines between the tiles and I had to get rid of them. So the problem with these white lines is that sometimes in Unity, when you take a tile, which is in my case 16 by 16, Unity adds or takes the pixels right next to the tile. So in this case it would take this one where like a line up here where nothing is, so it would add a white line. On the right side it would add a white line, on the bottom side it would add a white line, and on the left side it would not, because in this tile set it would take these tiles, so these colors. And the only thing that for me personally actually fixed the problem was to go ahead and, for example, take the last pixel and just duplicate it, put it onto the side and use that tile. So I ended up with my pixels not being 16 by 16 anymore, but at least it fixed the problem. So next up I started to fix all of my tile sets. do have more tile sets that I fixed, but I think for this video these images are enough, right? So afterwards I thought it was time to implement the ability to water tiles, and as you can see it did not work perfectly in the beginning. I am using the same logic that I use for changing grass tiles to dirt tiles, but I of course had to tweak it a little bit to be able to use the watering tiles. And of course it did not work right out of the box. Who would have guessed that? But after adjusting the code a little bit, I was able to actually get the watering tiles to work and to align perfectly. So I now was able to calculate which tile was on, for example, the right or the left side, and then basically I decided which tile is supposed to be shown and placed it or made it visible to the player. So what do you need after you are able to change the tiles to dirt tiles and to water them? Right. You need something to be able to plant and to grow in them. So I created this plantable class. So these are the first lines of code of the plantable class. In the current state of the game, the class has changed drastically. So I don't have, for example, any sprites in this class anymore. I do have a calculation on the grow time, and I already have it implemented so that you can harvest these plantable objects. I will show you this in a couple of seconds. So here you can see changing to a dirt tile, then planting a very awesome looking seed into it, watering it, and it changes the sprite to a fully grown carrot. Next up, I implemented a inventory system that you can open up and close. On the bottom you have the quick slot bar, which is always visible. And here you see me just testing it. I'm spawning a couple of test objects. I can use them, I can drag them around, and I can place them in the quick slot. You already see that still while opening the inventory, or while the inventory is open, and when clicking on an item, you do have this world interaction, so you are changing the dirt tile. So that was something that I of course had to fix, and I did in the next step. I also already implemented something to be able to delete items from the inventory. I then implemented some logic to check whether the player pressed any numeric key, so for example 1 to 0, and depending on what key was pressed, I wanted to highlight the corresponding quick slot. And this is what it looks like. So I can go ahead and press any key and select the corresponding quick slot. I then decided that it was time to create some images and some items that the player can use to actually use the logic to either dig up dirt tiles, like to change grass tiles onto dirt tiles. I chose a shovel for it, and I also implemented a bucket that the player can use to water these tiles. On top of that, I created an asset and a class for a seed package. So in my case, I created a carrot seed package. The player can pick that up, move it to the quick slot, and then when he has dug up a dirt tile, he can plant the carrot seed, water it, and grow some carrots. And so this is what I ended up with. I implemented a lot of other and additional things. So I still can spawn my items by pressing P at the moment. I can collect the bucket, the shovel, and the seeds. I then have them in my inventory. I can drag them to my quick slot. And now what I've also already implemented is I can select the bucket, I go to the water, and I fill up the bucket. The sprite changes. And something that I'm kind of proud of is I already have some animations. So let's say I have selected the shovel, I left click, and then I use the shovel to actually change these tiles. I have multiple animations from each side that you're looking at, so it doesn't matter if you're facing the player, if the player faces the north or whatever. I then can go ahead and I can plant all of these seeds. And then I can use the bucket, and I also have an animation to use the bucket, as you can see. So I can then water these tiles by using the corresponding item, and it shows me a nice animation. The bucket is empty, I have to refill it at this point, and then I can go ahead and water the tile again. And as you've maybe seen that the sprite doesn't change from the seed directly to the carrot. I have multiple growth stages, so let's go ahead and maybe show you guys that one more time. So I place the seed, and then I see this egg-like looking seed. I fill up my bucket, I water this tile, and now I can watch it. So now it pops to the first growth stage, where you only see some green leaves. Then it goes to the second growth stage, where you can see a little bit of the carrot. And now the tile is not watered again, but the carrot still grew. So here you see that I still have a bug in this. It's still not perfect, but I'm really proud of the current state. So thanks for watching and see you next time.